Hey, it's Mike Roen, Fix My Hog. In this video, we're going to have the talk. The salvage bike talk, the buy the crash bike talk, and we're going to talk a little bit about insurance to find out how good you're covered. So, getting back to the crash bike, it seems like an enticing idea at the time, and there's a lot of variables that go into this. You're at home, you're clicking around the internet, you come across this Harley, the price looks really low, and it's a crash bike. So you've got to kind of weigh your options now. First of all, you got to figure out how bad a hit this motorcycle took. You got to look at the company that's selling it and all the fees that accrue when you when you commit to say, I'm buying this thing, and you put a bid in. Now let's read all the fine print. How do I pay for this motorcycle? When do I have to pick it up? What fees are involved? I had a customer, he thought, you know what, I'm going to buy my kid a Sportster. There's one on here, it's a late model, had very low mileage, but it had kind of taken a pretty heavy shot. And he didn't really do his research on it. He didn't call me or anybody. And he said, you know what would I pay for this bike? He looked at what they sold for that weren't crashed, and he thought, I'm going to put a bid in for $1,600. That's it. That's my top dollar. He didn't want to deal with it. That was his bid. Well, as he watched the motorcycle all week long, nobody put a bid in on the bike because they all knew it was way too high of a bid, because he didn't look at the seller or the fees he was going to have to pay on the other end. So he won the bid, and he didn't read the part where he had to pay with a certified cashier's check on that day or be there to do it. He put it on a credit card. That was another 5%. There was another fee because he didn't pay it with a cashier's check. All in all, it was almost $800 in these additional fees on top of paying way too much for a crashed Sportster. So then he couldn't do the repair himself, which that's another thing you have to consider when you look at it. You say, well, I'm going into this bike because I'm going to fix it. That's fine, but you're still going to have that salvage title. So he brings me the bike, I write an estimate, and he just wants to put a Band-Aid on it. He wants to make it safe. And that's a contradiction in terms as well. But okay, so that's something to really consider. When you're clicking, you probably don't want to go all in. What you need to do is, okay, a Street Glide. It's like their number one bike. That's the bike you're probably going to be attracted to. It's a crash bike. From pictures, can you tell if the triple tree is bent? No, you really can't. But guess what? There's a pretty good chance that triple tree is probably bent. Some people think it's cool to straighten fork tubes. I don't know any shop that's going to do that for you. Back in the 70s, yeah, we did it all the time, 80s maybe. Nowadays, nobody does anything. They want to fix it with new parts because there's lawyers in this world and everybody's going to be held accountable. So if you're going to be fixing this motorcycle and you're going to be selling it, there could be a gray area there. Plus, you're going to be riding it. It's your life and your passenger's life, and it's just kind of a big risk. So if you click and you're going in, you got to figure, I'm buying all new parts to make this thing right. The front rim, the brake rotors, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And usually the main reason these beggars total out is the highway bar gets distorted, it bends the frame or it mounts the tab, and they take it to a Harley dealer, they write the estimate, and they go, well, it needs a frame, because for one, most shops are so busy now, when you bring a crasher to them, they don't want to deal with it. Everything's been nicked on the bike. It is totaled, in theory it's totaled. So it goes to the crashed website, they buy it for, whatever they're paying for it, and then they host it. It's usually the price things, it's the huge attraction, but what you're not thinking about is all the fees and all the repairs and all the unknown problems. And at the end of the day, you get this motorcycle all done, you still have a salvage title. And, I did talk to my insurance man about it. He said, well, the problem with the salvage title is your replacement, what you get on the replacement value is always less with a salvage title. When you go to resell a bike and you got a salvage title on a Harley, it's a big deal. If it's a metric bike, nobody really cares because the value wasn't there unless it's, say, like a Goldwing or something, So to me, that's a big deterrent. So what you need to do is you got to do the math. You got to figure out, how upside down am I going to get in this thing? Now, the flip side of that is there's so many people out there buying crash bikes and fixing them, and most of the time they're not fixing them 100% properly. They're buying used tools off, or they're buying used parts off the internet. They're putting a real cool guy paint job on the bike. They're putting the stretch bags, they're putting the aftermarket wheels, they're putting the handlebars on it, and they're asking a lot of money because the bike does look cool, and that's the attraction. Now they bring it into me for routine maintenance, and right away, deep down, I could start picking things apart in my mind. I can see the swing arm's got a gouge in it. I can see where the engine has bounced off the frame because it took such a shot, and it's maybe got a dent in the exhaust pipe from doing that too. And I don't want to burst the guy's bubble, but I want to bring it to his attention, that you start looking around and the primary's got a scrape on it. They didn't want to put a primary cover on it, It's just dinged up kind of all over, but it's got a really nice paint job. So now you've got a crash bike that you really didn't know, and somehow this guy feathered it through without a salvage title. And so when you buy a bike like that that's been fully customized, it's nice to have a history. Yeah, did this guy buy it brand new? Great. Now you're buying it from Joe Blow out of the garage, and he's real leery, doesn't know much about the bike, or maybe he's told you he's fixed it. It's hard to say. There's a lot of scenarios, but you just got to weigh your options. To me, I'm always looking for that stock low mileage bike, low price. It's going to come down to your budget and your abilities. If you're comfortable pulling the front end off and buying used parts and putting it all back together and making sure the thing's cool when you're done, and you got very little money into it, and you're going to ride the motorcycle forever and ever, and you're not worried about a salvage title, it could be an option for you too. Hey, before we get into insurance, I'm going to share a little quick story with you on a crash bike. So this guy had a 2009 Street Glide, and it had all the cool guy stuff on it. It had the paint job, it had the bags, the wheels, everything. And the individual he bought it from said, here's some new OEM parts because the fuel gauge isn't working right, and I didn't have time to put the fuel gauge in it, which fuel gauge is not a big project on a Harley. Pop the fairing off, put it on. And this guy, wasn't mechanically inclined, and we were doing a bunch of work to it. And he said, here, can you put the fuel gauge in? And then he said, the customer did put a brand new fuel sending unit in the tank. And we're like, oh, okay. No biggie. We're doing making it a 103, and pulled the fairing off, put the new factory Harley fuel gauge in, brand new, out of the box, put it in, and the fuel gauge still read incorrectly. And so we're like, well, obviously Junior screwed up putting the fuel center unit in, or something's wrong there. Did a lot of testing on the motorcycle, and it all came back to the fuel gauge. Everything's in the motorcycle is working properly, so we're getting a lot of time put into this motorcycle. And my business partner happened to notice that the motorcycle now had black gauges in it. If you notice, the Street Glide has silver gauges. Aha! So now we've discovered something. And then we looked at the part number, and he had purchased, or the dealer had given him the wrong year group fuel gauge. So that's the kind of stuff you'd kind of run into on crash bikes, but it's also another tech tip to make sure you're buying the right part for the right year group for your motorcycle. Otherwise you end up doing like what we did, is spending a lot of time to figure out who screwed this up. So whether it was the parts guy at the Harley dealer, if the customer told him he had the wrong year group, if he bought it from another guy that had fixed it as a crasher, we don't know. But that bike, in the end, shouldn't have had black gauges in it, and it had a different year fuel gauge in it too. So whenever you're buying OEM parts, it's always best to research everything, because you can't trust anybody these days. So, all right, enough of that. Let's move on to the insurance talk. And here's the dilemma with insurance. Now, everybody buys their motorcycle. Usually has stock handlebars, stock exhaust, stock intake, stock everything. And of course, what do? Spend big money on an exhaust system. You buy this cool guy high flow air cleaner kit. You put handlebars on that could cost up to $2,000 or more. You put stretched bags on it. You put a 21-inch wheel on it. And after a year or two, you figure out, wow, I've got about 15 grand worth of accessories. I made the motor a 110. You know, you've incrementally just put a lot of money in this bike, and it's very easy to do with a Harley. It adds up tremendously, and if you're paying somebody to do it, obviously it's going to even be more, you know. So, okay, everything's wonderful until you have the little upset. Yeah, you crash the bike, you tip it over, it gets stolen, something happens, and now insurance is going to be a big deal. We're going to find out how good you are hooked up with your insurance man and how well you're insured. Hopefully your insurance man's had the talk with you about accessory insurance. It's usually $3,000 to $5,000. Doesn't go very far though if you got 15 grand tied up into your bike. So now what you got to do is have all your documentation. It's like, I had this done, I had that done, I've got work orders, I've got receipts, I did all the work myself. My time's worth something. And so you present this to your insurance man. And he's like, okay, and they're looking out for them. They want to chisel away on you. So you kind of have to stand up for yourself and fight for every nickel you want to get out of your motorcycle. Another option, what some people do is they say, hey, they get right up front with their insurance man and they say, I have $35,000 into this bike. I have $50,000 into my bike. I'm going to pay a premium for $50,000. Because if I come out of the bar or I come out of wherever and my motorcycle's gone, I don't want to get a check for 12 grand because that's what my street glide's selling for on the internet. Nope, I've got 50 grand tied into it. You know, I want to be around getting a check for at least 40, you know, depending on how many miles, of course, you put on your bike, because they like to penalize you for a high mileage motorcycle for some reason. So at the end of the day, have the talk with your insurance man. See where your coverage is, see where you're at, because it's a slippery slope and they like to always win, you know. And so don't roll over right away, put up a fight, you know. Okay, I hope you found this informative. As usual, always check out Fix My Hog. We got a lot of great maintenance videos on there. We got a lot of performance videos, a lot of upgrades. Check it out. Thanks for tuning in.